So the second step of what I'll do in my planning stage of where I'm looking for what I think the problem is, the underlying problem is I'll also look through the VOD to find areas where my solution that I came up to for that problem, if that solution would have actually been acted upon, would it have actually have been helpful? Like playing that high ground, I can say, yeah, play that high ground, but if it doesn't actually do anything, then it's completely useless information and it's completely useless coaching. So that was my little point of, okay, yeah, if he had done this, then it would have worked, because he could have easily contested tanks down, and then Roadhog has shown that he would be there to get those hooks. So that was my point of, okay, I'm not giving out useless information just for the sake of giving out information. Now I know that this is the problem and the solution that I want to start presenting. Now I'm going to start doing it throughout the entire VOD. I'll still input other bits of, okay, this was like very obviously bad and we need to solve this, but if it's not the underlying problem, I'm not going to spend the entire time looking at it. So my second major issue, which is I'll typically limit VODs to one or two major issues. My second major issue here is well, it may look like he is playing it too passively. That is more of a symptom of the problem, which is kind of a indecisive play style of he's not quite certain of what he wants to do before the time actually comes to do it. And this shows that it's true throughout later parts of the VOD where he's not sure who he wants to focus or who he wants to protect or where he wants to be playing. So what I wanted to start working on was the general indecisiveness of, okay, we want to be able to make sure that we know that we want to be speed boosting in here rather than poking around corners, kind of healing, kind of speed boosting, but not really doing anything. So that was the second problem that I highlighted. So my problem with his performance in that fight, and I don't mean like the problem that I'm focusing on, but what would end up being my gripe when looking at that gameplay was how very little he contributed. It looked like he was waiting for things to happen, and then he would try to take advantage of that, which as a Lucio is very dangerous to do because you have that speed boost. That's how you get things happening. If you're waiting for things to happen before you start doing anything, then you're being completely useless. Like on some heroes, maybe you can get that to work. On Lucio, you really can't. Your entire point is being proactive. Like the only reactive thing about Lucio's kit is maybe amp heal sometimes, which is rarer the higher up you go in rank, and then sometimes ult usage, although almost always you've already planned out what ult you're saving your barrier for. So you don't want to be playing that super reactive play style because it ends up meaning that you get no value from your kit. So if I was not looking at an underlying problem of space denial and indecisiveness, that would be my big focus from this fight of, okay, like even if you don't know what you want to do, you still need to do something so that you're not being reactive the entire time.
Hey, so quick question
Yeah.
about the VOD. Would it have been a good idea if he decided to communicate, hey, I can speed you in here? It's like they had a pick. It's like, I'm speeding you in. And
Yeah.
then we can just speed, roll them there.
I mean, yeah, communication is never bad. There's never been a game where communication ended up hurting how the team did. Like it's never been, oh man, you called that on a low and she was 5 HP above what you called her at and that's why we lost that game. It's almost always just a bonus. It's also rarely necessary to use, but it is never a bad thing. So yes, absolutely. If he were to say, "Okay, Hog, we got this," like you don't have to say, "Okay, Hog, we got this hook." That would just be your internal thinking process. But you would be saying, "Okay, let's speed boost in." You get the team to follow in. Like regardless of if everyone follows in or not, you've already got that entry pick, and now you're getting the team doing something. So yeah, that would have been. It would have been more than fine to do. It would have been a good thing to do.
Thank you.
Yusho, can you do the taxi?
$5. Continuo.
Ano yung yun?
So this was another point where I highlighted his indecisiveness, which comes between him not knowing if he wants to contest high ground or if he wants to speed boost his team in, which that does play hand in hand with me wanting him to contest high ground. But the main focus here is he could have contested his team in very quickly, or from the start he could have gone to contest that monkey or diva, but there's a good bit of downtime there where nothing is happening, and then we do end up contesting high ground, which is good, but by that time it's too late, which is why I ended up bringing indecisiveness as a second big problem, because yeah, contesting space is great, but contesting space doesn't matter if you're taking 30 seconds to do it. So they play so hand in hand that it's kind of, you have to be able to bring up both, which is what I was doing here. So if, say they would have been speed boosted in earlier, Zarya wouldn't have gotten as easy of a grab, or even if she did still grab, they would have to commit more resources, because no team is going to willingly throw out 6 ults at the choke that's 50 feet away from point. But if the entire enemy team is on point, starting a fight, going aggressive, whether they mean to or not, they're going to end up throwing out many more ults. So that would be where, even if we don't know if it's the best decision, we need to do something there.
Genji, go.
So at the intro of the fight, it displays one of the problems, which was not one of the things that I was focusing on, but I just want to bring this up so that everyone can get a broader span of, a broader understanding of what some of the problems in the game can be. Like, you don't just want to be saying, oh, their Widow is good, so we need to start killing their Widow. That's your problem. I hate types of analysis like that. But so that kind of presented the problem of his reactionary playstyle of he was waiting either for his Ashe to get a pick or for his Ana to already nano the Genji before he was willing to actually commit to going in there. Like, yeah, it's nice to go in at the same time as your Nano Blade, but if you're sitting at choke for like 10 seconds while you have the ability to speed boost your team in because you're waiting and not doing anything until that Nano Blade comes out, then you're just wasting time at that point, and it's making your team waste time at that point because you directly control where they end up going. Towards the end of the fight is when the idea that I was focusing on of indecisiveness gets really highlighted, where he starts to go in, he gets the point, but then he is not sure if he wants to fight on point or if he wants to protecting his backline. And he ends up doing neither because of it. He's not there to help the fight on point, and he's not there to help on the back line. Yeah, if he had contested high ground to begin with, those tanks would have had a much harder time diving his back line. But regardless of the solution to actually keeping his back line alive, there just needed to be that step of, okay, this fight I am specifically here to keep my backline alive, or I'm specifically here to speed my tanks in, rather than, okay, I'm here to speed. That doesn't, like that internalized thought process doesn't actually tell you your goal for that fight or for that map, and it ends up just leaving you wandering around, not knowing if you want to go to your supports or if you want to go to your tanks, which is where he ends up getting lost, and then that's when he's a free pick. So a point that I made sure to bring up here, this would be one of those areas where it's not a underlying problem, but you still very much want to bring it up because it is something that was, I say grossly, not as, oh my god, this was just horrible, but something that was very clearly wrong and something that very clearly needs to be corrected, and I made sure to bring this up as a point. I'm not going to actually go through the entire thing that I explained because I'm not here to improve you all as improve you all as players. I'm here trying to get the coaching process down. So if you ever do see something in your VODs where you do plan to focus on one underlying problem or pattern, don't be afraid for grossly incorrect plays. Don't be afraid to actually bring those up and go over them. It just doesn't need to be the focus of your VOD. So again, there was that point of general indecisiveness of he didn't know if he wanted to poke around or if he wanted to go deep, and that even though it seems like a short time, that short time gives the enemy team time to exploit them as well. So that would be where I bring up another point of, okay, this is another example of you doing this, so here we should be doing this or this instead.
I will
So at this point, I had brought up a couple more few micro mistakes. Still nothing that would overpower the idea behind the whole video of focusing on that one thing that I thought was a major problem. But I was still bringing up things like, okay, here there's still mismanagement of our abilities. Of do we want to speed boost? Do we want to heal? And that's where we should be learning those matchups of, okay, unless someone is like poking at our support, if we're just running away, we just want to be speeding them away. Like there's no need for a heal there, because if they catch up to us, us healing them isn't gonna save them to begin with. So that's where we need to know what we want to do. It's not something that like you have to do. There's still a much more important focus on those patterns that you plan to analyze and look at, and that should still always be your first priority. But if there are ever downtimes of, okay, this fight, there's not really a great example of what I wanted to teach, I can kind of look at that, but then I can also highlight a rather micro thing that I also see that is losing us fights, and I don't have to go through looking at every fight for that same problem, but at least for this fight I can highlight that so that we can work on that. They may not remember that concept, but at least it'll get them thinking. If they do remember it, then one, it'll get them thinking mid-game. Two, if they don't remember it, if that ends up becoming a major problem, you can look at it in future VOD reviews, and you can use that as another example of, okay, this isn't something new, this has been a fundamental problem of ours, how are we going to solve it now? So I'm going to, at least for the people that I think came for the sake of wanting to see how I would actually do things, I've already hammered on the head, okay, look for one major problem, focus on that. You can input little smaller things, but focus on that one thing, provide examples of that one thing in action, and then provide solutions to that one thing and explain how those solutions would have helped. So now I'm going to start looking at it more of, okay, I've already explained it for people who want to find my process. Now I'm going to start talking about how I actually did this in the VOD for anyone who wants an example. So here, this was, at least to me, a very clear example of his indecisiveness. So I started off by highlighting how from the beginning, it started off well of, okay, he came back, speed boosted his team in, decided that he wanted to peel onto the monkey, booped him off, and then started to harass him. But from there on, it started to be, okay, like we're poking around left side, we're kind of poking down mid, but we're not really sure of where we want to go. From that point, it turned into not knowing if we wanted to go on to point or if we wanted to play back, because we ended up cycling between both, which leads to nothing happening. From there, I wanted to offer the solution of, okay, start taking fights forward, so that if you're taking fights forward, people are focused on you, you're able to disrupt them, you're able to stop them from diving your backline in the first place, and then that way your backline is not as much of a problem. So you're helping your front line by being up there, or you're helping your DPS in this case by being up there, but at the same time you're kind of helping your backline, because your backline doesn't have to be doesn't have to worry about being dived unless their tanks are just completely uncontested, and then they're given the time to see, oh, their backline is unguarded, now let's jump them. if you're in their tank's face the entire time, or their DPS's face, or their Genji's face, or whoever's face the entire time, they're not going to get the chance to say, okay, give me 2 seconds to look at the enemy's backline. Oh, there's no one there, so let me dive. If you're harassing them to begin with, you're kind of playing like a DPS there. If you were to be, as a DPS, harassing the enemy's Ana, they're not going to get the chance to be looking to heal their tanks. If you as a Lucio are harassing the enemy's tanks or DPS, they're not going to get the time to look to harass your backline. That was the general goal you want to be doing here, so that would be where I wanted to highlight what decision I would recommend implementing, explain how it would work, after giving an example of what the problem was to begin with.
No one can hide from my sight. I'm on the objective. Come join me. We can't let them win. Everyone's attack. We do not have time to wait. Now.
So my biggest problem there, which it stems directly from indecision, was his desire to want to be everywhere at the same time, which just ends up to you being nowhere at all. Like, he wants to go forward to be aggressive on the monkey, but at the same time he wants to start peeling for his backline. But at the same time that he wants to start peeling for his backline, he wants to rotate out. But at the same time that he wants to rotate out, he wants to start speeding his team forward. So there's not really ever a clear decision of, this is my game plan, I'm sticking to it, let's do it. It's always kind of, I don't know, I'm a Lucio, I can peel, I guess. Oh, okay, I'm done peeling. I can do damage too. My team wants me to heal them, I can heal a little. It's kind of always that no clear decision of what Lucio is capable of and what you want to be doing with that character. It's always, yeah, I'm playing this character and I can do all these things, so let's do them. It should be, I'm Lucio, I have this ability for this really insane speed, let's start taking advantage of it by speeding my team in.
I don't like you too.
You are bad DPS.
No, you bad.
Oui, oui.
Meow, meow.
So, when doing a VOD review, you don't only want to look at the negative. If you're only looking at the negative, it is, one, a very easy way to get people to start feeling self-conscious or negative about their own gameplay, which you never want them to do. You want them to be able to recognize and critique their own gameplay, but you don't ever want them to think, oh my god, I'm so garbage, I'm never going to improve, whatever. Like, you want them to realize their mistakes and to start striving to improve those mistakes, but you don't want them feeling depressed because of their gameplay. So it's always, and then the other thing was, I can't remember because I just rambled on about that. So it is always important to highlight, if you see good things happening, highlight those good things as well. So as I talked about from the start, I wanted him contesting high ground a little bit more so that he can contest tanks and DPS at least a little, so that his support is safer. And I wanted to highlight how he starts off doing this, which is really good because it's like the correct positioning here. From here, he can go downwards to help his team. He can rotate back to point, or he can just play up here to stop a dive, which is exactly what he wants to be doing. So I put an emphasis on this is good. This is what we want to be seeing more of, so that he understands that he is capable of doing good and doing what he should be doing, and then he can start trying to replicate that in future games rather than, okay, I'm doing all these problems, what am I ever going to do? You can say, okay, well, I'm doing these problems, but I know this is good, so let's keep on doing this. So, if you are reviewing someone around, like, I'd say GM or something, maybe not so much Masters because, well, yeah, you can do Masters, it just depends on the intensity of it, but a lot of people around this rank start to get to the point where, okay, they want to join teams. So from a VOD review, you want to help them like in game. What can they do to like improve here? Like, okay, you should be doing this in game, but you also want to start preparing them for their team part, right? Like as a main support, which is different from a main healer, you're gonna be expected to do some shot calling or ult tracking. Either one, more often than not, it was at least some basic form of communication. So here I bring up how it's important to, like, yeah, you see that Rhine is going in super deep and you don't want to follow in on that Rhine. That's only logical. But you need to start working up that communication so that you can say, Rhine, I'm rotating out, speed out, so that you're not leaving him alone without him being completely unaware. Because he only survives this because he gets Zarya bubble at, like, actually 0 HP. So you want to, like, it's not necessary there to tell Ryan what you are doing, but from a team perspective, you're 100% going to be expected to be talkative there. So if your player is at that point where they're on a team or they want to soon be joining a team, don't be afraid to also start working to prepare them not only to be the best in-game player, but also the best communication or role player by telling them or teaching them what they would be expected to do in whatever scenario of, okay, your Rhine went in too deep. Even if you're not expected to stay with that Rhine, you're expected to at least tell the Rhine that you're leaving or that you're rotating him out as well, rather than being silent there, which is fine to be silent in a comp game, but from a team environment, it's not fine.
I have shadow, come back.
Go ahead, Maddie.
I'm charging my side.
Handle.
So again, on the point of looking at instances where your proposed solution would have been beneficial, I took this time to highlight, okay, if we were playing on high ground like what we're looking to start doing in the future, not necessarily like aggressive high ground or you're not a main tank, but high ground that still gives you the option to play for your team when needed. If we were playing up there to begin with, we could immediately boop that monkey downwards directly into our team, and then that would be a free pick. So I don't have to emphasize it like, holy shit, you're throwing by not being up here, because it's not that serious. But I do want to bring up the fact that my solution does have its benefits, and we want to start trying to implement that solution, and that I want to actually show off those benefits so that a player doesn't think that I'm just spewing out random information just for the sake of spewing it out. Again, I took this time to highlight his indecisiveness, not saying, okay, you're not making decisions here and it's seriously losing you the game, like you're playing this horribly. No one likes hearing such negative feedback. Just take this time to say something like, okay, you want to babysit your Ana, but you're still not sure if you actually want to go in a Thrine. So you have to commit to both, which means you commit to neither. Just things like that, where you're like, he clearly understands the problem by that point. So just an emphasis of it rather than an extreme over exaggeration of how serious the actions were. Just now seeing your message. If you're always depressed, that's just a big ol' feels bad, man.
But
So, towards this point of a VOD review, as an analyst or a coach, or just if you do nothing but review VODs, this is going to start being the point where your player knows the game is lost, you know the game is lost, you know that nothing you tell the player here, like, oh, if you were to be playing up here, you would have won this game. You know that's not true. You know that there's been a series of events that have already led up to this point. Like, you can't just give one blanket statement of, you should have been doing this instead, and now by this point you would have been rolling. Because it's not going to be true, and everyone knows that's not going to be true. So instead of saying, oh, in this fight when you were already down 3 and they only had to take a tick and they still had 6 minutes left on the clock, if you would have done this, you all would have easily stopped their push. This is the time where you start looking to reiterate on your main point, so that this is kind of the point of summary, and you start to, so you've highlighted your main point, and then you emphasize that, okay, there's nothing you can really do here. So before we get to this point, we want to be working to solve our problems that led up to this. That's where you start to bring that into play, and then you can start looking at some minor micro problems here, but more often they're not. If you're being rolled this hard, then it's probably going to be issues because of tilt or something, which you want to look at them, but you don't want, like, you never want them to be the primary focus of your video unless it's like tilting is the problem for your player. You don't want it to be like, oh, you tilted this one game out of 3,000 and now I'm going to focus super heavily on it. Like, okay, you've lost this game. Let me emphasize now on the points that I've already created, and then we can just go on from there to the next VOD or whatever we're doing.
Point.
all one.
Who did you not know?
So this point, it's lost. Everything I have to say to the player had already been said. I've already emphasized my points. I've used all the examples I can use. I've done everything I possibly can. I end up closing out the VOD by summarizing what I wanted to focus on. Start explaining that, start explaining the solution to it. And then I start emphasizing super heavily that I want to see this improvement in their next VOD. A VOD review is completely useless if none of the information that you're planning to teach actually gets implemented. So you really want to hammer home that you want to see this improvement in their next VOD. Whether it's like a team and you're telling them to all put sticky notes of what they need to improve, or if it's just an individual player of, okay, in your comp games, start trying to do this now, and I want to see you doing this every time, and in your next VOD, I want to see this improvement, and then we'll go on from there. Even if it means in the next VOD you have to reiterate on something you've already tried to teach, if it takes that level of emphasis to get it across to your player, then you have to do that, and that's perfectly fine.
Is it a good idea to, like, so towards the end of the VOD, where we've kind of already decided, yeah, this is kind of like GG's. And when we want to emphasize the point, is it a good idea to try and kind of like pop wisdoms, like, all right, what did we go over, and what are like the big main problems?
That
Because
would,
my
yeah. I mean, that wouldn't. That would. I don't see how that could ever be a bad idea. You do want to do these things to keep your players focused, because the average human only has an attention span of 20 minutes. That's why TED Talks are always shorter than 20 minutes. So, which is also why I always say don't do 2-hour long VOD reviews or something. I always try to keep it between. For teams or for players, I usually keep it around 30 to 45 minutes, even if that means I'm only going over one map. And for players or for teams, it'll be 45 minutes to an hour, because everyone's going to get distracted, everyone's going to get bored, everyone's going to want to do things other than this. I wouldn't be surprised if the VOD reviewer gets bored. So if you're able to implement these things into your lessons and into your VOD reviews, where like you don't want to go completely boring, monotonous VOD review and then at the very end give them a quiz, because they're just going to have completely forgot everything. So you want to input these little things throughout the VOD where if it's a live thing, you want to be asking them questions. You want to be doing, well, assuming it's live, because if it's not live, it's going to be kind of hard to quiz them on it. But assuming it is live, you want to be asking them questions, asking for their point of view, asking for what solution they would have thought of. And then towards the end, you could quiz them, and that's a very good way of keeping their attention. If they know they're going to be quizzed, they're going to be paying attention to that VOD. Like, they're not going to, if they know they're going to be quizzed, they're not going to half-ass their way through it and then half-ass their way through the quiz. And if they are, then that's when you drop them as a player.
Alright, thank you. I was just kind of thinking about it because I like took up coaching as try to get people to think, kind of better myself as a thinker, but thank you.
So, this whole thing is coming to an end. With the end of the VOD, there's only so much more I can go over. So, I want to take this time to ask anyone if there are any questions about anything in general. It could be about the VOD, about whatever. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Alright, so we're going to call this the end.